Spotlights wash over glass towers. Fountains dance in the desert air. A convoy of black SUVs slips through heavy gates into a palace compound the size of a small town. This is Riyadh at night. Above the city, private jets blink on a runway that never really sleeps. Out in the eastern province, a forest of oil rigs pumps under floodlights. Back in the capital, a giant screen in some quiet boardroom shows a number most people can't even read at a glance. The annual profit of Saudi Aramco, the national oil company. On paper, it belongs to the Saudi state. In practice, the state is ruled by one family, Al Saud. Newspapers call them the richest royal family on earth. Sometimes you'll see eye-popping estimates, hundreds of billions, even over $1 trillion if you add up everything they touch. The image is simple and seductive. One extended family sitting on rivers of oil money, buying palaces and football clubs, while the rest of the world argues about gas prices. But reality is more complicated. What does it actually mean to say the House of Saud is the richest royal family? Where does the state stop and the family start? To answer that, we have to go back to a time before skyscrapers and supercars, when their power rested on something much older than oil. The story begins in the dusty oasis town of Diriyah in the 18th century. The Saud clan were local leaders in central Arabia, a harsh region of deserts and scattered villages. Their capital wasn't money in a modern sense. It was land, tribal loyalty, and a reputation for toughness. Then came a partnership that would change their fate. Muhammad ibn Saud, a leading figure in Diriyah, formed an alliance with a religious reformer named Muhammad ibn Abd al-Wahhab. Abd al-Wahhab preached a strict Puritan form of Islam, urging a return to what he saw as the original practices of the faith. The deal was clear. The Saud family would defend and spread his teachings. In return, religious legitimacy would support their rule. Together, their followers built the first Saudi state, conquering large parts of the Arabian Peninsula. It didn't last. Ottoman forces eventually crushed it, but the model stuck. There would be a second Saudi state in the 19th century, and, after more wars and exiles, a third. That third one is the one we know today. In the early 1900s, a young Abdulaziz ibn Saud, often called Ibn Saud, began retaking territory with a small band of fighters. Through a mix of tribal alliances, religious support, battlefield skill, and careful deals with great powers like Britain, he gradually stitched together most of the Arabian Peninsula. In 1932, he proclaimed the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and crowned himself its king. At that moment, the House of Saud controlled a lot of sand, some key holy cities, Mecca and Medina, and important trade routes. But compared to colonial empires and industrial powers, they weren't rich. The real transformation was still underground, literally. In 1933, desperate for revenue, Ibn Saud signed an oil concession with an American company. A few years later, commercial oil was found in large quantities. The Arabian-American oil company, Aramco, was born. At first, the Americans had most of the control and took most of the profits. But the Saudis gradually pushed for a larger share, buying into the company and renegotiating terms. By the 1970s, the Saudi state had taken full control. Aramco became Saudi Aramco, a national oil company. Its profits no longer flowed to foreign shareholders. They flowed into the Saudi budget, and that changed everything. Saudi Arabia sits on some of the largest proven oil reserves in the world. Once pipelines, ports, and refineries were built, The kingdom was in the middle of the global energy system. Every surge in oil prices meant a windfall. Even when prices dropped, volumes were so huge that the numbers stayed staggering. Saudi Aramco's job is to pump, refine, and sell that oil and gas. It pays royalties and taxes to the government, plus dividends. In many years, those payments make up the majority of the Saudi state's income. That money funds salaries for public employees, infrastructure projects, subsidies, defense spending, and a lot of the privileges the royal family enjoys. So when people ask, how rich is the House of Saud? You can't answer without talking about the Saudi state itself. The family doesn't just own private companies, it sits on top of the main money machine. The House of Saud is huge. There are thousands of royal family members, often estimated around 15,000 in total, though only a few thousand belong to the inner core descended directly from Ibn Saud. Within that core, you have kings, crown princes, ministers, governors, generals, ambassadors, and business magnates. For decades, the system worked on a kind of royal patronage logic. The state collected oil money. The king, as head of the family and the country, distributed key positions and favors to different branches of the clan and to important tribes. Senior princes controlled ministries, provinces, and security forces. Many royals received stipends from the state, regular payments that could run into tens of thousands of dollars a month or more for the higher ranks, plus perks like free flights, land grants, and cut-rate loans. On top of that, individual princes and princesses built their own fortunes. Some invested in construction and real estate, others in banking, telecoms, media, and foreign companies. One famous example is Prince al-Walid bin Talal, who for years appeared on global rich lists with stakes in Western blue-chip firms and hotels. For people like him, royal status opened doors and made capital easier to access. If you try to add all this up, official stipends, private investments, property, and the fact that the family effectively controls a state oil company and a giant budget, you can easily reach enormous numbers. That's where claims like, the family is worth $1.4 trillion come from. But there's a catch. In many monarchies, there's a clear line between what belongs to the crown personally and what belongs to the state. The British royal family, for example, has some private wealth, while big assets like the crown estate legally belong to the nation. In Saudi Arabia, the distinction is blurrier. Aramco is a state company. The Public Investment Fund is a state fund. Royal palaces are technically owned by the government. Yet who appoints the managers, who chairs the boards, and who lives in those palaces? Members of the House of Saud. Which brings us to the modern era and a new name at the center of the story, Muhammad bin Salman, widely known as MBS. As Crown Prince and, in practice, the day-to-day ruler, MBS has pushed a plan called Vision 2030. The idea is to reduce the kingdom's dependence on oil by investing in other sectors: tourism, technology, entertainment, green energy, and more. The main tool for this is the Public Investment Fund, PIF, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund. PIF has exploded in size over the last decade, managing hundreds of billions of dollars in assets. It buys stakes in everything from US tech companies to European sports clubs, electric vehicle makers, gaming studios, and flashy domestic megaprojects like NEOM, a proposed futuristic city in the desert. Legally, PIF belongs to the Saudi state. Politically, it answers to a board chaired by the Crown Prince. In other words, it's another place where state and family interests tightly overlap. If you're deciding whether the House of Saud is the richest royal family, this creates a dilemma. Do you count only clearly personal holdings, the private bank accounts, properties, companies, and investments held in individual names? Or do you also count the assets of Aramco and PIF, which the family doesn't own in a normal commercial sense, but directs and benefits from? Most large estimates do the latter. They treat the family and the state as one giant financial organism. That makes for dramatic headlines, but it's not quite how the system actually works. Inside the kingdom, money plays another crucial role, managing the family itself. With so many princes and princesses, potential rivalries are built into the system. For decades, kings tried to balance different branches by giving each a share of the pie. A governorship here, a defense ministry there, a business opportunity somewhere else. Stipends and perks helped keep minor royals comfortable and loyal. In 2017, MBS shook that pattern in a very public way. Dozens of princes, officials, and wealthy businessmen were suddenly detained in Riyadh's Ritz-Carlton Hotel under the banner of an anti-corruption campaign. For months, the luxury hotel effectively became a high-end prison. Many detainees were later released after making settlements with the state, reportedly handing over cash, shares, or property. The total value of these recoveries was said to be tens of billions of dollars. To supporters, this was a long-needed cleanup of a system where some royals had treated public money as a private ATM. To critics, it looked like a power play, a way for the crown prince to weaken rival factions and pull more resources under his direct control. Either way, it sent a clear message. In the House of Saud, wealth is not just comfort, it's a tool. The same network of accounts, assets, and privileges that ties the family together can also be used to discipline those who fall out of line. So, is the House of Saud really the richest royal family on earth? In one sense, yes. No other dynasty today sits atop anything like Saudi Arabia's combination of oil reserves, a cash-gushing national company, a giant sovereign wealth fund, and a deeply enmeshed royal state structure. European monarchs control far less of their country's economic engines. Gulf neighbors like the ruling families of Qatar or the UAE are also extremely wealthy, but their populations and resource bases are smaller. In another sense, the label is misleading. Most of the assets behind those trillion-dollar headlines are not private piggy banks. They are national assets controlled by a monarchy. A future Saudi government could, at least in theory, change how they are governed. A political crisis or a shift in public expectations could force a clearer separation of state and family property. There are also real risks. The kingdom still depends heavily on oil income in a world slowly trying to move away from fossil fuels. Huge domestic projects and foreign investments may or may not pay off. Regional tensions and internal social pressures have to be managed. And the more the royal family's money is tied up in highly visible assets, from sports teams to skyscrapers, the more the world will scrutinize how that money is used. In the end, the House of Saud's wealth is best understood not as a number, but as a position. They sit at the center of a system where oil, politics, religion, and global finance all meet. Their family name is on the palace gates, but it's also on the signature line of state contracts and on the decisions of a sovereign wealth fund that can move markets with a single investment. You can call that the richest royal family if you like. Just remember, what they really control is less a pile of gold and more a set of levers. Levers that can shift money, shape economies, and decide how the world's most prized resource still flows out of the desert.